Most likely yes. All right. It is August 8th, right? Yeah. All right, everybody. Today is August 8th, 2024. It's my little Bible study here at Humble Hearts Ministry. We're still working the book of Revelation, right? Now, we're going to start with a recap kind of on what we've just been talking about. Most of it's been the tribes of Israel. Now, if you've been here for a while, this is about the seventh time probably that we've actually talked about the tribes specifically. All right. Well, today we're going to kind of wind it all up. And when it comes to the tribe, now I'm going to talk you through some of it. There's a lot of Bible in the middle, but I'm going to talk you through some of it just for time's sake because I want to get back to the book of Revelation because you're going to find out that the subject doesn't change. Okay, so yes, last Thursday or last Friday, got introduced to the idea of the tribe of Joseph, right? And that Joseph is one tribe out of the 12. And all the rest of them are his brothers. He had two boys in Egypt, right? Manasseh and Ephraim, and that their blessing that was blessed by Jacob, their grandfather, hadn't came to pass in the time in biblical history anyway. All right? And I kind of went on my way to kind of try to tie us to them. When it's exactly what I believe is going on in the world, and it's exactly what you see in the Bible when you actually look at it. All right? Now, if you remember, Ephraim was a company of nations. Manasseh was a great nation. One singular great nation. And Manasseh was the older one, but he said this day, that's why he had that cross-handed blessing. He said, I'm the one doing. This is the way it's supposed to be, right? All right? Is that he's truly greater this day. And greater wasn't about power, it was a numbers thing, right? One nation versus a company of nations or many nations. All right. So nonetheless, that's where we were when we left off last time with Ephraim. All right? Now remember, all these boys, Jacob is their father. All right? His name's changed to Israel. All right? Israel had 4 wives, Rachel and Leah, which were sisters. All right? And each one of those sisters provided another wife, Bilhah and Zilhah. All right? You get a lot of old school Jews called Bilhah and Zilhah concubines, but you can see in the Bible, they don't want to call them in the Bible, call them a wife. So I gave him two wives. All right. So they kind of got a little bit of disparity going on there with that. All right. But nonetheless, out of Leah and Zilhah, they provide 8 out of the 12, and then the other 2, Rachel and Bilhah, 2 each. All right. To wind out to 12. Now there's a little girl thrown in there, Diana. All right, and she's the only girl in the mix. 13 brothers, 1 little girl, aging from poor girl. All right, she grew up pretty safe though. All right.
Hey, I got a question.
Yeah.
So where's our nation come in through the King James?
And the King James, through the tribe of Manasseh, is where it starts. All right. Ephraim, remember, was a company of nations, or to be many nations, right? And you come out of that geographical location of Europe. Manasseh breaks off, becomes a new nation, the United States, in 1776. All right. Now that doesn't mean it's the only tribe. I believe the United States is those 10 tribes that were to the north. All right, the ones that got scattered into the world. He promised he'd gather them back together in the last days. Well, God doesn't lie. Okay. So that kind of brings us into it. All right. Remember, these tribes after the Assyrian captivity, they went north through the Caucasus Mountains and into Europe. All right. Then settled in the United States. And then Canada, all right, same people, same groups of people, all out of Europe, all of that company of nations those 2 brothers represent. The promise that never came to pass in biblical history. That's the kicker right there. That stuff didn't happen in biblical history. It was promised. We already read it once. All right? But nonetheless, we're knee deep in it. Now, whether you're born exactly from the lineage that is Israel, or whether you're converted as a Christian, well, you still belong to the house of Israel. What tribe you belong to depends on geographical location. In the Old Testament, they had certain had certain ranges. If you lived in the tribe of Judah, you were called a Jew by geographical location, even though you might have been in the tribe of Manasseh. All right, but you're living in Judea. There are plenty of biblical examples of it. And if we ever do Genesis, I'll draw them out because it's full of them. Where where they're called is a geographical name instead of what their blood lineage is. So sometimes it gets confused on what you're talking about. But anyway, you can sort all that out. But nonetheless, these 4 women, right, provide 12 patriarchs. Each one of these sons, Exodus is a good place. Exodus chapter 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt, every man in his household. came with Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. His sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. Now these are the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Simeon, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of Judah. All right. Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. All these are the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob. Were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. All right. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. All right. So you see, if you remember, if you know the book of Genesis, you know they go to Egypt because there's a famine on. We kind of talked about that when we were talking about Esau, right? Esau couldn't find any wild game, thing that his dad really liked. All right. Why? Because the famine was already starting to kick in even back then. All right. And it comes to fruition later. And that's why they all go there. And if you remember, they go there first just looking for grain, and they run into Joseph and don't realize it's him. He sends them with food back, and they plays the game with Benjamin, right? Well, he's just testing these boys. He wants to see, well, have they learned anything since they sold me? Or will they sell my brother Benjamin, because that's his blood brother that we were talking about. Will they sell him to save their souls, save their necks in Egypt, is what he was testing them to see. And when they wouldn't do it, and he figured it out then that God had done all that to put him in Egypt to save both Israel and Egypt. Why? Because he's building a nation. All right, and when they're there 400 years, 70 souls go in. All right, go into Egypt at the end of the book of Genesis, but about 3 to 4 million come out in 400 years. All right. And so there in Egypt, they don't start out as slaves. If you're a student of the book of Genesis, they're friends of Pharaoh. All right, but over time, they're not Egyptian in Egypt. And over time, the people, like I said, they forgot who Joseph was, and they forgot who Jacob was, and the things that had happened. All right, and they just became slaves in Egypt like anybody else that would be subject to the Egyptians during that time. All right. But nonetheless, they come out, right, of Exodus, and that's where we get all this stuff, those great miracles that Moses did, or not God did, that Moses' bequest, right? Yeah, all those things, they come out, they head straight to the promised land. Along the way, though, they stop and they get the Torah, right? They get the first 5 books of the Bible, right, at the mountain, and they head straight to the promised land, and they screw it all up because they can't follow instructions. It's just like a test. I'm going to use that reference a lot, like test, because that's what the book of Revelation says. These things come upon the world to test them that dwell upon the earth. All right? So it's easy. We've got to copy the test. All right. So they come out, but they mess up. So then they get stuck in the wilderness, and the Mimbar is the Greek, or excuse me, is the Hebrew word. All right? That means the wilderness. It's what we call the book of Numbers. All right? They do the whole book of Numbers, and then they come to the end of the book of Numbers, and that's where Moses gives us the book of Deuteronomy. All right. Now, the book of Deuteronomy is considered a book of law, which it is. It's also a book of prophecy. All right. But a lot of the law that's omitted is a lot of the Levitical law, a lot about the sacrifices and the temple and all that functioning. It's like Moses knows what's going on. All right. He's been up in the mountain like 7 times. He's made 7 trips already up to talk to God face to face. Moses knew every step that was going on. All right. But nonetheless, where were we? Deuteronomy. He's got the book of Deuteronomy. So he sits down, and I like to look at this. This is what my dad's expression. He says, he looks at the book of Deuteronomy like Moses just sat down a rock and grabbed everybody around him and said, look, I got to tell you some stuff before I go, because it won't be long for this, and Moses will depart. All right, because he's forbidden to go into the promised land. And people say, well, why? There had this stuff that went on with the rock and stuff, but I don't. Moses is one of the prophets that comes to the 2 prophets of the book of Revelation we're going to study. All right? So his work wasn't done. We'll talk more about that, though, when we get to him, all right? But anyway, so here in the book of Deuteronomy, like I said, he's sitting down, he's some things he wants to tell them, all right? So here in in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 20 is where we're going to pick it up. And Moses is going to tell them their future, all right? And this is a future that when we get done with it, it's looking at us. That's who it's talking about. And listen to what it says. But the Lord hath taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be unto him a people of inheritance as ye are this day. All right, so he's giving that pep talk because they're going into the promised land. All right. Furthermore, and note that though, they're going to take possession of the land that day. All right. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me for your sakes, and sware that I should not go over Jordan, and I shall not go into the good land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. But I must die in this land, and must not go over Jordan, but ye shall go over and possess the good land. He's telling them right then, these 3 or 4 million people, he's telling them right there, all right, we screwed it up 40 years before, but today you got it right. All right, why? Because these kids, everybody that was an adult that walked out of Egypt has died. All right? The only ones that survived are those kids that walked out. The adults all died. God even goes out of his way in the book of Numbers saying, look, I wasn't mad at the kids. Because their parents made their decisions for them. He said, but these kids, 40 years later, now are parents and grandparents. All right? And every step that they've taken, they've had evidence that God walks with them. All right? They had a fire by night, a cloud during the day, quail bubbles up from the ground, water from a rock, bread from heaven. All these things he's done to preserve the tribes and to preserve Israel. All right. Now, but he said, and they messed it up. But these kids, they saw it. All right, so buddy, when they're ready to go, they had every confidence. They weren't like these slaves that walked out of Egypt. These kids were born free. All right, and they walked every step of their life with God. So when it comes time, when they say they're going in, they know it's payday. All right, they ain't like their parents where they had doubt. Bring on the giants, no problem. That was their attitude because of the things that they'd seen. They didn't have faith. They had just an awareness of what they were doing. They saw it right happen in front of them. All right. But, take heed unto your, okay, let's see, the good land. He's going to go in and take it. Verse 23. Take heed unto yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and you make a graven image or the likeness of anything which the Lord thy God hath forbidden thee. No idolatry, period. Remember, he even went as far as to say, when I came down to Mount Horeb, you didn't see anything that you could even make an idol out of. He did it that way on purpose. So he wouldn't have any memory of an image that they could worship. Just like that, that was last night. We were talking about the brazen serpent. But anyway, another story for another day. All right. Verse 24, for the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. A consuming fire, but he doesn't consume you. You're not his enemy. You're not evil. Don't confuse evil and sin, all right? Everybody sins. But not anybody in this room I don't think is evil. You get what I'm saying? There's a difference. Hey, you might want to be. No. But you get what I'm saying? All right? So don't confuse the two. Don't let a pulpit confuse you about it either. All right? Now, but nonetheless, verse 25, and when thou shalt begot children, now listen to this, they're going in the front. And when thou shalt beget children and children's children, so they've been around a little while. All right? And ye shall have remained long in the land, ye shall corrupt yourselves and make a graven image, or the likeness of anything that shall do evil in the sight of the Lord thy God to provoke him to anger. They're going to do it. He knew they were going to do it. Moses has already been told. He made 7 trips up on the mountain talking to God. He knew everything was going to happen to Israel. The Jews have a tradition that's centered around these events around Horeb, is that Moses met every leader that would ever be in the house of Israel, whether they were in the land of the promised land or scattered abroad. Met every one of them. Think about who that would have been there. But we got a couple of cases up right now. You know, if that was so, then they met them then. I just think that's interesting. I just kind of throw it in there for fun. But nonetheless, he says you're going to do it. So I told you not to do it, but after a while, you're going to do it. All right? And what's he say here? Verse 26, and I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. He's telling them, they're not with them, this is against you this day, that ye shall soon utterly perish off of the land whereunto you go over Jordan to possess it. And ye shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall be utterly destroyed. And that's the prophecy about being scattered into of the world. He said, if you sin, I'll punish you for a time. If you continue to sin, I'll punish you again for a time. And if you continue on behalf time, I'll scatter you among the nations for doing these things. Well, he did. He meant it. All right? And Moses knew all about it. All right? And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and you should be left there, few in number among the heathen, whether the Lord shall lead you. Think about how many dislodged groups of people we've had down through history. People that have a cultural identity but not a homeland. We've had a lot of these through history. All right? Many of these same ones settling here in the United States later on in history. All right? But nonetheless, he promises them right there, I'm scattering you. You're going to, until when? What's he say? And there you're going to remain few in numbers, so not real big, until the time of your desolation is up, until the time and a half time. And after that, then, those particular tribes become nations, as promised to Abraham, as part of the covenant with him and part of his descendancy, all right, which we've already talked about. All right? Verse 28, and there ye shall serve gods and work with man's hands and wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. Most of us come from people who have pagan identities. All right? We're the people that did like the Wicker Man first. Remember, like out of Irish and Scottish? You know, that Burning Man stuff? That's my people from way back overseas. All right? They had a festival just like that where they built the image of a man, and at a big festival, they burned it. All right? There's nothing new under the sun. Okay, it all comes from somewhere, and none of it goes away. It all stays with us. All right? But nonetheless, it's exactly what he said. When I scatter you out in the woods, you're going to forget who you are, and you're going to worship these things. All right? It's going to be a part of who you are then. You're going to know who you are. Ta-da! All right. Verse 28. And there you shall serve. Well, we already did that one. 29. But, what's it say? But if from thence thou shalt seek the Lord thy God, and thou shalt find him, and if thou seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul, and when thou art in, what's that next word? Tribulation. Like the book of tribulation? Like the book of Revelation? All right? And when thou art in tribulation, that brings you all the way to now. All right? And all these things are come upon thee, what? All the ones that are in the book. All right? Even in the latter days. Okay? If thou turn to the Lord thy God and shalt be obedient to his voice. All right? What have you done, Christian? You have a pagan identity for a long way back. But what have you done? Been obedient to God's voice, just like Moses said you would. Okay? None of these words skip out and they're gone. They all are ye. They're what we are. All right? They're the things, that's the things we lost is our identity. All right? Well, guess what? It's coming back. All right. Verse 31, for the Lord thy God is a merciful God. Never forget that. And don't forget that mercy applies to others, not just you. All right? I see that as through Christianity. They want to accept mercy, but they don't want to give any. Okay? We got to give it, right? That's just the thing we have to do. That gets part of that, getting rid of that luggage when you're saved. All that stuff, you got to get it. If you drag it with you, it just eats a hole in you. All right? So that's why we have to forgive. And every one of you know that's true. Everyone in this room knows it. All right? Including me. All right. But listen to what it says. Be merciful. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he sware unto them. All the way back to Abraham. Jacob. All right? The thing we forget about this covenant is that we didn't have anything to do with it. God always stated, I am doing these things. That's nothing to do with us. Okay? Now, that takes you all the way through from going into the promised land to being kicked out of the promised land and then gathered all the way back. All of it happens within a few verses in chapter 4 of the book of Deuteronomy. Moses sat there and told us it all a long, long time ago. All right. Now, in 1 Kings, we've talked about this as Solomon, right? Now, everything's going good in Israel. We go after we were Deuteronomy. Okay, Joshua's next. All right, because Joshua leads the people into the promised land. All right, and Joshua sets up the system of Judges, which is the book of Judges. All right, and those are the characters that are in the Bible from the book of Judges. Those are the first way that they ruled themselves, was through judges. After the book of Judges comes Kings. All right. This is not all, but I'm leaving out prophets. I'm just kind of going in and kind of move us all in a direction with this, right? All right. The first king is a guy named Saul. He does good for a while. All right. He gets in, kind of laying in bed with these little false gods. All right. And he loses favor with God. David takes the throne. And David is what I call one of the only real righteous kings there are. All right. Especially early on. All right. And that's where we get, Book of Kings and then 1st and 2nd Samuel and all those will come in there. All right. After David, all right, that's two. We got Saul and David. The third king is one of David's sons named Solomon. All right? And Solomon's most noted for being wise. Matter of fact, he has a lot of relationships with women based on the fact that they know who he is and he's pretty sharp. All right? The Queen of Sheba being one of them. All right, the thing that we often overlook about Solomon is Solomon wasn't to use his position as king to increase his harems nor his wives. All right, but he did it anyway. All right? God kind of let it slide. Now, you stay with me. All right. He also did something else. They weren't supposed to have war horses in Israel. All right. Solomon's the first one that breaks with that law, then goes to Egypt and brings in war horses from Egypt, and that's where horses come into the vernacular in the Hebrew language. It was at Solomon's time because he broke God's law again. All right. He wasn't supposed to marry outside of the tribes, but he prolifically did. All right, so he married all these foreign women. All right, we have a thing in this country where you have to be born in this country to be the president, right? All right, well, this is kind of like that. The law was set up to where, and the reason why is because if you're born in another country, who knows what ties you really have, all right? And then he wasn't supposed to marry outside of the tribes, outside of his people for that exact same reason, all right? Because who knows what happens, though, because of it. Because over time, he starts building these temples for these wives. Several hundred of these concubines and wives. All right? And it's so bad, and it goes on for so long that he eventually goes and takes a knee in there. Worships there himself. God hammers him at that point. I've appeared to you 2 times, and you've still done these things. All right? And because of that, we have the scene with Elijah, which is in 1 Kings, probably somewhere right in there. Jeroboam, and Shiloh and Elijah, right? In 1 Kings 11:29 and on. Right? And because of what Solomon did, all right, God sends Elijah with this new coat. And he tells Elijah, take it, you cut it into 12 pieces. All right? And you get Jeroboam down here. And you remember we've talked about Jeroboam before, the one that started his own religion, put his hand on an altar and swore and told him to seize the prophet. His hand withered up, right? And until the prophet prayed for him, he didn't get his hand back. Same Jeroboam. Okay? I don't know why. I don't question what God did, but he did it. He gave Jeroboam 10 tribes. He cut that whole garment into 12 pieces, and he gives 10 of them to Jeroboam. Says from this point forward, you're the king of the northern tribes. Those northern tribes, God called Israel. All right, see, I told you, Israel got a lot of different caveats. This is another one of them. All right, as the kingdom is divided, he names the northern set of 10 tribes Israel, and the southern kingdom he calls Judah. Why? Because the tribe of Judah is there. Okay. Now, we go back to this desolation, this scattering. He promised to gather them back together. Okay. Well, over time, all these tribes have been reborn as nations, and then all of a sudden, in 1948, the house of Judah, who after Christ is crucified and resurrected, it's scattered into the world. They're scattered into the world as well. All right, but the thing about the Jews is they maintain who they are. And over time, it gets confused that they're not Israel, but simply the tribe of Judah, the one we call the Jews. All right, so in 1948, and Judah was the last one to go into captivity. Their captivity period was over 400 years. There are different times through 400 years, but all of them were sentenced to the same time. All right, so that means over a period of a few hundred years, you have different nations that come out of their term of punishment. Okay? And when 1948, the entire house of Israel was reborn. Not just the one we call Israel, but all 12 tribes. Just not the one we call Judah, the Jews. Okay? Which is also the king's line, by the way. All right? And Levi is the priest line. All right? So, that takes you all the way up to that. Now, let's look in the New Testament, all right? Now, listen to what, remember, we've talked about this before, but let's look at a few verses. Matthew chapter 10 talks about these tribes. These 12, Jesus sent forth, commanded them, saying, he's talking about the original 12 apostles, all right? Go not into the way of the Gentiles and into the city of the Samaritans, enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Straight to those tribes, scattered into the world. He knew right where they were. Why do you think we send out people into the world? He said, go straight to them. All right? And as you go, preach, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. But whoever you meet, you run into somebody, you might want to tell them good news. All right? Because it applies to everybody. But, buddy, he told them to go running right out there and find them. Okay? You don't think that means something? Look at this. Who's the book of James addressed to? James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Greetings. Welcome to the tribe of Joseph, people. Okay? You got a destiny to fulfill. You stand in the last days. All right? And you're one of a handful of people who actually are beginning to get a grip on the tribes of Israel and who they are. And in a way, get a grip with who you are, where you come from. Most of us can't go back past our great-grandparents. Some of us not even our parents, or grandparents. All right? But you tell you what, God ain't lost one person. Not one. He knows where his people are. He knows you. He made you exactly as you are, and as you are, as you are. Why? Because he wanted you to be this way. He wanted you here in this fight. All right? Now, let's go back to the chapter 7 of the book of Revelation. All that, 6, 7 times we've talked about the tribes. Why? So you can understand chapter 7. What does it say? And after these things, right now this, oh, wait a minute, let's back up just a second. Getting excited here. All right, chapter 6, we what? The 6th seal, right? We were in that one.
Right.
All right, the 7th one is in chapter 8. All right, you have this just kind of thrown in the middle, right between the 6th seal, which is when all the stars fall from heaven, the fallen angels return, and the 7th one, which is Christ. All right, right in the middle of those two things, you have this chapter, those who are sealed. All right, and that's what we're going to talk about. All right, and after these things, I saw, what was these? This the 6th seal, right? Where all the stars from heaven fall. I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. All right, now, it's time to learn a little bit about symbols again. See, chapter 17, verse 15, I believe. The waters that thou see are people, nations, and tongues. A lot of people gather, not the exact quote, but people gather together under national banners, speaking different languages. All right? So that's what you're talking about with the earth and the sea. The earth and the people in it. All right? Nor any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. He's sealed. He understands them. All right? The seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea. The earth and the people. All right? What does he say? It says, to whom is given to hurt the sea. Verse 3 saying, hurt not the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. All right, so you ever wonder what's going on? I'm going to eventually kill myself on this speaker. But hey, what a way to go. I told you it's going to be useless. I'm going to slip off a toilet, something. All right, I went through too much stuff to go out in the blaze of glory. I'm going to be this insignificant, got hit by a meteor or something. All right?
I don't think getting hit by a meteor would be insignificant.
Maybe it is if it hits me. All right. But nonetheless, what's he saying we're waiting on? Till people like you and me have those seals. We understand that apostatic horse, that first white horse. All right? We've all sat here for that one.
So that goes with all the tribes or just the
Oh, wait,
tribe?
we're getting to them.
144,000?
Okay, I'll tell you, watch. And I heard, in the forehead, and I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel, all 12 of them. 14, really, when you break it down like we did. All right, listen to what it says. And of the tribe of Judah, the Jews, all right, were sealed 12,000. Each tribe gets 12. And of the tribe of Reuben were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. And of the tribe of Asher were sealed 12,000. And the tribe of Naphtali were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Manasseh, we've talked about this house quite a bit now. All right, there were sealed 12,000. All right. Of the tribe of Simeon, remember him? Were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Levi, remember him? The priest line, one with no home, with no land. But he knows where even the tribe of Levi is. But they didn't have a homeland. They didn't have land up to that. But he still knows that because he sealed 12,000 out of that tribe in this generation. And of the tribe of Issachar were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Zebulun were sealed 12,000. Here's where it gets interesting. Of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000. And the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. Okay. Now, here we have the 144,000 in the last days who out of those very tribes are getting that seal placed in their forehead right now in this generation. And when that's accomplished, that's when them trumpets blow. Okay? Now, out of all that, you have now that don't let anybody ever try and convince you that this is the only people that are saved out of the book of Revelation. All right? Because they're not understanding what's happening. Okay, we've done work with the foundations, right? We've done the foundation lecture where they had that book of life that was chosen from the Lamb's book of life from before the foundation, not the one used on Judgment Day. All right, this was the one, remember, when they're sealed, and it talks about them being sealed. All right, but listen to what it says after that. A great multitude, verse 9. After these things I beheld, and lo, there was a great...
You don't need to get this mixed up with the mark of the beast in the forehead of the right hand either, do you?
No, okay, well, this is occurring in the forehead. It's in your mind, okay? And just like the mark of the beast, you'll do something. You'll have some kind of labor that you do if you're sealed with God, right?
Part in Revelation.
Say what now?
This was mixing me up right here.
Okay, yes, okay, okay, you got to remember when these names were chosen from before this age started, right? Remember, they were chosen, that book was written before day one of creation and this heaven and earth age, the second one. Now, if you don't understand that exactly, you're going to have to get on the YouTube channel and day one and first two lectures of Genesis on the other side, not your guys' side, but on the other side of the YouTube channel will help you with that. All right? But you have to understand that. And we're going to talk about it more because when we get to another one where he talks about all three and it's often overlooked.
Just for knowledgeable to speak it out, it doesn't mean numbers on your hand.
Right.
A lot of older stuff that has been told to us. And
that's right.
It could be, I don't know. I don't know any.
Well, when we hit it, we'll go into it in depth about it. All right, I'll show you.
About the mark of the beast.
That's right.
So
it does say the
just
right
that
hand.
In the forehead, right? Yes, it does. A mark in the forehead, but it doesn't say. It doesn't say on the forehead.
While we was
It
in
says
it,
in the forehead. What's in your forehead?
While we was in it, I
Your
just
mind.
asked.
Right. If you're sealed though, in your mind, right? You're not tempted.
Yeah.
Okay, you understand how you see how this falls now? And those people that understand that were the ones that were sealed out of those tribes that we were just reading about.
Yeah, because I'm not the best reader, but when I was reading through in 2021, this part was messing me up.
It can't. Okay.
I'm thinking, do we gotta have the mark
Yeah.
and then I'm thinking, we had the mark, we're going to hell.
Okay. This is marked in the same way as the beast, but this is what
This is a
God
sealed
sealed.
mark.
This is sealed, right? This is in your forehead and in your hand. If you have the seals of God in your forehead and you know that the Antichrist is going to come first, when it happens, you will labor. That's what that mark in that right hand means. You will do labor for them. If you bear the mark of the beast, you have his seal, the beast mark in your forehead, and you're bleeding and you're working to help him along. All right? This is the same thing. If you're sealed and you understand the apostasy, all right, when it happens, you won't be able to keep your mouth shut. You will try to tell everybody, no, we've talked about this. We've talked about it. We've talked about it backwards. We've talked about it forwards. All right? So, so you'll labor then, even if you don't do it then. You know, because right now, a lot of people I've talked to sit there and they're not convinced of anything. All right? But when these things start to happen and they go down, then people will start renting. Then it's when you go, oh, wait, we talked about this. This was here, right? And we're going to cover all the biggies because we're going to go line by line, verse by verse. All right. I don't want to get ahead about the mark of the beast or any of that, but because that's a fun one, and that's a fun one for me to teach because I like busting up traditions that get people screwed up in the end, and that's one of them that's going to do it. All right. And I'll draw all that out and put my argument out there just plain and simple, and what you decide's up to you. It's like anything. My job with all this is done when I speak. All right, I'm done. I plant seeds, God waters them. All right,
Absolutely.
and that's how it works. All right, so my job is not to convince anyone of anything. My job is to tell you the best that I can what it is, and then God's Spirit
Well, you just
waters
give
it.
water.
Right,
I
that's
guess
right, and then it
God
grows.
just gave water
That's right.
for you to be on a certain thing. So
That's right. That's right. And that's the way it works. I mean, that's how we all learn the same way.
We have him in our heart.
That's right.
And I believe we will know.
See him, we'll die.
I think even if we're being attacked or it's
Mm-hmm.
really bad, everything, you got your heart.
That's
He's-
right.
He's in your heart.
You're gonna.
Hey.
That's right.
It says he
You'll
loves
know.
your heart.
That's
even
right.
if you don't- Yeah.
The things you got to remember is you got to learn to trust what it says here. All right. Because he's a good scripture lawyer, and he's going to argue, have a counter argument for everything anybody says, because he's good with the book. All right. Now listen to what it says. I want to finish this chapter, because this just throws out the window when somebody says, well, it's only these 144,000 that are saved, because they're the only ones that says that are sealed. But no, it says, but these guys were chosen from a long, long time ago, all right, and they're the ones that are supposed to testify against this freak when he shows up, and that's all they are. All right, anybody else can be sealed. Don't get confused about the difference between being sealed and being chosen. All right, anybody can be sealed, but it's like the apostles; they were chosen, and they were sealed as well. All right, so you don't have to be an apostle or disciple to be sealed. You just have to have the knowledge in your mind beforehand, and that's why they may go for a year, 2-year drought. But then when something happens, you gotta water that little bad bear and it'll sprout. All right. And I function on, this is how I teach. I function on that idea. I've told you guys before, I'm going to die on this thing. All right. I've told you guys before, most of the stuff I do isn't for now, it's for when the Antichrist actually appears. And then you can say, look, we talked about this years ago. Here's the date. All right. That's what it means. It's what you got to do is tell people beforehand, because that's what brings them out of their baloney. And we're going to get into exactly what that is here in a little bit. Not tonight, but as we go. All right, but listen to what it says. After this, I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man can number, of all nations, kindreds, peoples, and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, palms in their hands. Does it sound like there's only 144,000 there? Not to me either. All right. And cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and to the Lamb. And all the angels stood around about the throne and around about the elders and the 4 beasts, and fell down before the throne on their faces and worshiped God. Those 24 elders, 12 of them are them patriarchs, most likely. Out of those tribes that were just listed. Now, if you go back to those tribes, you remember there's a little something about Joseph. Remember, Joseph was a tribe. He was supposed to be the last one with Benjamin, but he had 2 grandsons, right? Well, Ephraim was one of them. Now, Ephraim's sin was so egregious, and he continued in it, that he lost his right to field any of the election in the last days. He's not listed here. His daddy, Joseph, is, though. He takes his son's spot. Because when it's Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's not mentioned usually. Because Manasseh and Ephraim are the tribe of Joseph. As a company, a nation, and a great nation. So that's why you see the little, you gotta have 12. I don't know why, but that's what they say. And so when they number them, it's 12, but there's really 14. And however it shows up is how they want to get 12 out of it. All right. And Ephraim is excluded in this because of his sin, the sin of his tribe. Okay. Now, so Joseph, his daddy takes his spot. Joseph takes his spot. All right, but Manasseh, the other brothers in there, was mentioned, right? But nonetheless, they cried to the worship of God, saying, Amen. Blessing, this is 12, saying, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be unto our God forever and ever, amen. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence come they? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. So he doesn't know what it is. All right. And he said to me, These are they which come out of great tribulation. So it's naming the tribulation period. So many that you can't number them by the end, and some of that will have to do with your testimony when these things occur. Okay? And have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. Remember that? We talked about that in Ezekiel. All right? In that millennial period. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. And they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb, remember, they couldn't have any garment that made you sweat. Remember in the book of Ezekiel? They wasn't allowed to wear anything that made you sweat when you were doing service. That's what he's saying. Let's see what they're saying there. The sun ain't going to heat, ain't going to affect them anymore. Why? Because you're being in a spiritual body. Those kind of things, terrestrial fire has no effect on the spiritual body. All right? For the Lamb, which is in the midst of the throne, shall feed them, and shall lead them into the living fountains of water, and God shall wipe away all their tears from their eyes. And we saw that in the book of Ezekiel too at the end of that, when you see God coming for judgment day. All right, you also have God's promise that anybody that doesn't make it, all right, and the third heaven and earth age, there won't be a tear shed for them because you won't remember them. All right, so it may be you may stand there and see somebody you love die, but you have God's promise that when the third age takes over, the heavenly age, you won't shed a tear for them because you won't even remember they ever existed. To be destroyed in hell means that even your memory is gone. All right, there will be nothing that can be revived from that. All right. Now, okay, anybody got any questions? That's where we're going to stop tonight because we're going